So if you talk about the next data type that we are going to discuss, it's null. It's very controversial, to be very honest. In other languages apart from JavaScript, like I have learned a lot of languages. I have worked with Python, I've worked with C++, Java. But this interesting case occurs only in JavaScript. Because to be very honest, JavaScript as a language in the history, throughout the history, they have made some mistakes, but they have done some very crucial things also for programmers. They have tried to touch each and every possible corner case. So if you hear the word null and if you hear the word undefined, this is an image that demonstrates the difference very easily. I got this image from one of the Stack Overflow articles, right? So if you hear the word null and if you hear the word undefined, then both of them gives you a sense of emptiness. If you remember what I taught about undefined, something not defined yet, but maybe defined later, right? Something not defined yet, but maybe defined later was undefined, right? Now there is something new in the picture, null. If I say something not defined yet, but maybe defined later, it's kind of a sense of emptiness. And to be very honest, null also gives the sense of emptiness. So what is the difference between null and undefined? Null and undefined. So let's talk about null. So when you say null, right, it actually represents empty value. It actually represents empty value. If you have the sense of actual emptiness, that is actually shown by null, right? Whereas if you talk about undefined, undefined is a value that has not been given a value yet. It was never given like even not even an empty value. Like empty can also be considered as value, like nothing can also be considered as value. But if you have never given it a value, that's undefined. So if you look at this image, so this is an example. The user has taken the example of a toilet paper roll. So let's say if this roll is still having paper, it is definitely a non-zero value. The roll is still having paper. If this roll is now having no paper, then this value is 0. But just think about it. If you don't even have the roll, if you don't have the roll, you can't have the paper. So now I can say that this is a null value. This is a null value. But what if there was no holder altogether? There is a holder, right? This is a holder. This is a holder. If there was no holder, then there can never be a paper roll inside it, right? So this holder is also actually completely gone. So we can say that in this wall space, somewhere down the line, maybe there can be a toilet paper holder that will hold a toilet paper, or maybe there will be some switch, or maybe we'll post something, anything. So this particular wall space has never been given a value, but it might be given some value later. Whereas here you can say that this holder is in place, but the roll is missing. If the roll is missing, that is this particular roll. If the roll is completely missing, then there won't be any paper. So it's 3 layer, right? There is a holder, there is a roll, and then there is a paper. If there is a holder, then definitely sometime down the line, only one thing can occur in this wall space. That is a toilet paper roll. Currently, there is no toilet paper roll. That's okay, but it cannot be like now moved or shifted somewhere, right? When you put inside this holder, if you put a roll that is not having a paper, that means paper got exhausted. That can represent a 0 value. And if you have a paper, that can represent a non-zero value. Long story short, there are two data types to give the sense of emptiness: null and undefined. If you go with other languages, like Java, C++, they just have null. They just have null for most of the cases. But here in JavaScript, we have one more case handled. Like if you go with something like C++, then null is going to define both of these cases because they have not differentiated things so well. But if you go in the world of JavaScript, they have differentiated things very well. So this kind of a case is going to be handled by null. This kind of a case is going to be handled by undefined. Undefined is, let's just think. If let's say you say something like let a, if you say a variable let a, now I have not given this variable any value. So never it has been associated with any value. So currently it is not defined. That means it will be undefined. I'll demonstrate with code also, but this will give you the value undefined. Whereas I can do something like, let's say we were having some value b is equals to 10, and now I want to just vanish this value. I can say b is equals to null. So b more or less gives the impression of empty value, that the value is now empty. Let me show you with a coding demonstration so that you can even see that actually this gets printed in JavaScript. So what I can do, like you guys already know that we have to create variables. We can create variables in different forms. So let's say if I do something like var marks is equals to 100. Then let's say if I do var name is equals to Sanket. Let's say if I do var age and I'm not giving age any value. If I do var company, let's say I put a value null like this. If I let's say put var is equals to salary, I can even put undefined. Let's say var is a student, I can give it a value false. Okay, something like this. Now let's try to print all of them. Let's try to print. So I'll say marks is equals to comma marks. Right, let me try to print all of them. Then let's say name is equals to the variable name. Age is equals to age. Company is equals to company. Salary is equals to salary. And is a student equals to is a student. Okay, let's say I'm trying to define kind of like a person or a user somewhere, right? So I have created a new variable marks. I can create variables with var, let, const, all of three. In the initial days, most of the time we'll be using var or let only. Later when we will learn scope, we'll try to understand the actual differences. So I just created all of these values. Let's try to run it. How to run it? Let's just press on this. And you can see all of these values are getting printed. Now let's see one by one. We say marks is equals to, and the variable that I'm trying to print is marks. What is the value of that variable? 100. It's a number. So see 100 got printed. Name is equals to name. So it's Sanket. It's got Sanket printed. Age is equals to age. Now see, I have not given age any value. It has never been given any value. So it gives you a sense of being undefined, and you can see it prints undefined. It prints also undefined, right? Why it automatically got undefined? Like for the timing, you can just understand that a variable that has not been given a value will automatically get undefined. How it gets it, like the process of giving the value undefined is going to be learned in lexical scopes part. That's going to be coming up later. Now let's say company is equals to null. So see, you are able to print the value null. See, it's not a text. I have not wrapped it inside double quotes, single quotes, or backtick, right? It's a separate entity. You just write null. It's a keyword. JavaScript recognizes that it's a keyword null. That means you want to store a value null inside this variable. And this is one way to create undefined variable. Otherwise, you can even manually give the value undefined. That currently nothing has been given to it, so I'm just giving it undefined, right? So you can even manually give undefined and see undefined is getting printed. And you can give false also. So false is getting printed. But you can see, right? to define all of this looks very complex, right? Looks very complex. How about if I want to define something like a user, which has a complex set of values? So we can do this using objects. How do you create an object? So just like how I created an object here, you have to put a pair of curly brace. You see, pair of curly brace, pair of curly brace, and here also you can see a pair of curly brace. So you'll always put a pair of curly brace, and inside the pair of curly braces, you will do it. So let's say name, Sanket, company. You say Google, and let's say age 23, 24. Right? Let's keep like this. And let's say if I do console.log details of the user is, let's print the variable user. See, name of the variable is user. Let's try to print it. Let me clear the console. Right, let me put it like this. Let me expand a bit. And you can see details of the user is, and can you see it is printing it in the same manner? Name, Sanket, company, Google. So in this one complex entity, I have defined one user. In this one complex entity, I have defined one user. So how do you define an object? You put a pair of curly brace. You put a pair of curly brace. See, here also you put a pair of curly braces. Then you put a key, you put a colon, and you put a value. And then you put a comma. Then again a key, colon, and a value. Value is going to be some valid JavaScript type. And a comma, comma, comma. After every key value pair, you have to separate it by a comma. Right? So see, I've separated it by a comma, and that's it. I will print the user and I will get a user. So when we have to define complex entities, you can use objects also. So we have demonstrated most of the data types that we have learned till now.